In September 2023, a man in a rubber caveman mask walked across the University of Washington campus in Seattle. The crows ignored him. That was the finding. That was the thing worth writing down, that nothing happened. Which mattered, because the 17 years before, it made no sense at all. Every time, something happened. Screaming before he'd taken 10 steps, birds dropping out of trees, a mob assembling out of nowhere, and almost none of them with any reason to care. Work backwards from there, and it stops making sense. In 2006, a biologist named John Marzluff put on that mask and trapped 7 crows on that campus. He banded them. He let all 7 go, unharmed. Then he took the mask off and went back to being a man with a face nobody minded. The crows had never seen the man. They had seen the mask. Marzluff needed a control, a face that walked the same routes and did nothing to anybody. He picked a Dick Cheney mask. I want to be clear that I am reporting this, not editorializing. In the peer-reviewed record, Dick Cheney is the harmless one. Then the walks began. Same campus, years going by, neutral mask, a glance, nothing, dangerous mask, instant war, scolding, a hard rattling call that means look at this one. Then the mob, then the dives. And it never mattered who was underneath. Students wore it, volunteers wore it, different heights, different clothes, different gaits. The face was the file. The man was irrelevant. At the peak, Marzluff has said something like 47 of the 53 crows he passed would scold him. 7 birds were ever trapped. That's the number that ends the easy explanation. You can tell yourself a story about 7 traumatized animals holding a 7-animal grudge. Fine. Everything has memory, but the mob was never 7. It was most of the campus. Birds screaming at a mask that had never touched them, that in some cases did its damage before they existed. And then there's the clock. Seattle crows live maybe 15 to 20 years. The experiment ran 17. The 2011 follow-up and proceedings of the Royal Society B is where it gets uncomfortable. Crows that never saw the trapping learned the face anyway, from the flock. A young bird watches the adults lose their minds at a particular arrangement of rubber and writes it down. That one. Then it scolds the mask alone, adults nowhere nearby. So does the generation after that. The grudge outlived the grievance. The birds with an actual reason drifted out of the population. The reaction kept running on birds who had only ever been told. That's not memory. Memory lives in one skull. This is a face converted into information and handed forward. A thing the flock says about a stranger to birds who will never meet him and will hate him on sight regardless. You know what that is. That's a reputation. And here's the thing about a reputation. It has to be about somebody, which raises a question the experiment walks straight past, because the answer looks obvious and isn't. How does a crow tell 2 humans apart at all? We're a nightmare to identify. We change color daily. Clothes, hats, hoods, umbrellas. We come in sizes that would be several species in anything else's book. A raccoon looks like a raccoon on Tuesday and on Friday. We don't, so the crow does what you do. It goes to the face. That's the quiet punchline of the whole mask design, and it's easy to miss. Swap the body underneath. Swap the height, swap the walk. The bird still nails it. Swap the face. And the bird has nothing. Marzluff wasn't only testing memory. He was testing what a crow thinks a person is. The answer came back, a person is a face. Same answer you'd give. Quick question while you're sitting with that. Because I want the answer. Have you ever been dive-bombed by a crow and had no idea why? You weren't picked at random. Somebody had made a decision about you, possibly before you got there. Tell me below. I suspect more of you have a file open than realize it. And if this is your kind of thing, subscribe. Costs nothing, changes an unreasonable amount. Now, if I stopped at the grudge, I'd have told you a lie by leaving something out. It's the exact lie that gets this story passed around as crows hold grudges. Spooky? Don't cross them. They keep the other column too. There's a story the BBC ran in 2015. And I'll flag it as a story, reported from a family rather than run as a study, because that distinction matters. A girl in Seattle, Gabby Mann, had been feeding crows since she was small. Peanuts on the yard, water in the bird bath, every day, for years. The birds started leaving her things, a bead, a screw, a bit of glass polished down. Her mother kept them in labeled bags, because at some point you stop pretending it's coincidence. And the one that gets me, her mother lost a lens cap in the yard while photographing the birds. It came back, turned up on the rim of the bird bath. Now careful, nobody has shown that a crow understands a gift. There's no crow concept of debt, and the people who study this are noticeably more cautious than the headlines were. Maybe you're looking at birds carrying small objects around, dropping them where they eat, and a family noticing a pattern. But something was happening at that house, and not at the house next door. That's not the weak part of the story, that's the whole story. The birds had sorted one address from every other address on the street. Same machinery as the mask. Crows track positive and neutral encounters with exactly the attention they give the bad ones. Gabby wasn't being thanked. She'd been assessed, run over years of mornings, and the result came back safe. Same cabinet, different tab, which quietly reframes the whole 17 years. It was never a revenge system. It's an accounting system that happens to be capable of revenge. And it isn't mystical, which to me is the best part. Marzluff's team put crows through brain imaging, PET scans, birds looking at the two faces. The dangerous mask didn't just activate the visual regions. It lit up the circuitry for threat and emotion, the areas that do fear. So the crow isn't reading you the way you read a license plate. It's reading you the way you read the face of someone who once screamed at you in a parking lot. Recognition arrives already wet with feeling. Careful here, though, this is where the internet oversteps. And I'd rather not. None of this shows crows have morality. No concept of good and evil, no ethics. Nothing deciding you're a bad person the way your neighbor decides you're a bad person. What's documented is individual trust assessment carrying an emotional tag. Dangerous, neutral, safe. Held for years, shared sideways through the flock. Smaller than morality. Also, if you're honest, most of what morality does on an average Tuesday when nobody's thinking about it, and it makes hard evolutionary sense. Crows are long-lived, intensely social, often mated for life. And they've ended up living inside our cities, our garbage, our buildings, our streets. When your habitat is a species that sometimes feeds you and sometimes shoots you, and from 100 feet up, the two look identical. Telling which one is which isn't a trick. It's the whole game. A crow that can't tell humans apart lives in a world where danger is weather. A crow that can lives in a world with a map. Other animals run lesser versions, magpies, some mammals. But crows are the sharp case. 17 years behind it, and a Cheney mask in the methods section. I'd rather hand you one thing that's nailed down than 5 things that are vibes. Here's where I land. And there's no bow on it. We ask whether animals can judge us. There's an assumption buried in the question. That judgment is ours. That reading character takes language and law and a big soft brain. 17 years in Seattle says otherwise. It takes living next to something dangerous. Being made to guess right, daily, for life. Give an animal that problem long enough and it starts keeping records. Nobody has to ask it to. There are crows on your street. They've watched you walk to your car for years. They know how you move. Whether your head comes up when they call, whether your hands have ever thrown anything, and what it was. That's not a metaphor. That's the job. Somewhere out there, without language, without laws, without any of the equipment we assume this requires, something has formed a view about what kind of person you are, and mentioned it to others, though the thing I keep turning over is the ending. 17 years. Then one September, the mask walked past and nobody bothered. Whatever the flock had been carrying, they set it down. They remember kindness exactly as long as they remember cruelty. Which means it was never a verdict. The file's still open. I have no idea what's in yours.